Oh, that's better. Hello, good evening. It is Saturday, I believe. Fuck, no, it's, sorry for my Portuguese. It is Sunday, Central Eastern European time, and it is 12:30, so depends where you are, but either happy Saturday evening, happy Sunday morning, happy Monday, whatever. We're picking up our podcast from the last one, and I have to big apology for everyone because on Twitter I did write that we would do it last night, but there was a huge series of problems and I just could not get it done. At like 3 a.m. I gave up because there was just a lot of technical problems on getting it up and running, so we are 24 hours late. However, I did notice once again that the last podcast for us did get a very high amount of views, and as always we thank everyone who had the courage to watch that for a little bit, for longer, whatever. We always hope something that we said could be useful to somebody, and I just want to get, if you've seen the icon for this podcast, you will notice that Karl Marx right now is just kind of getting a little bit too out of control on his R&R on the beach in Vietnam. So we want to close up as quickly as possible this issue, which was kind of contingent with the grandeur of Marx, the relationship to Marx, and also Pierre-Félix Guattari. And, you could spend thousands of hours going over all of this. And in the end, like I said, our point here is to give you a little bit of information that we can give you. Hopefully it'll be helpful, and then, you will you pick it up and you decide, you do your thing. So, in that spirit, if I can do it, I'm going to try and share a comment to the last podcast, which is definitely worth sharing. Just to give the context, I think the last podcast I was kind of saying that more or less, in my opinion, the relationship between Deleuze and Marx was peripheral. That's what I was saying. And then with Guattari, Pierre-Félix Guattari was a militant from the get-go. He belonged to the Communist Party. He was very convinced in Marxism, etc., etc. So I was kind of trying to say that in L'Antidipe Mille Plateau, what is philosophy, I would kind of keep that out of the picture, because in my opinion, that's kind of a book which has a very, very different tone. But, as I stated, I think that the contributions to Marx came much more from Guattari than Gilles Deleuze. However, I do not want to make the impression that Marx was completely peripheral from Deleuze. So let's see if I can share our comment here. My goodness. Hang on 1 second. Capture the fenêtre. There you go. Here it is here. I hope you can see this. So you can see it in the comment section anyway. But I kind of agree with all of this. So yes, I think the essential point is Pierre-Félix Guattari was a more, I'll risk and say it, a more convinced Marxist than Gilles Deleuze. However, let's not use that to take away from Deleuze's relationship to Marx, which is not negligible. Absolutely 100% agree. Let's see if we can open this up earlier. This is from And I've done this before. Ex Laus Legale. I've done it before. Check out he has a page on YouTube. Some interesting stuff, Deleuze and cinema. So go check him out. And he says, I agree that Guattari was a grander Marxist than Deleuze, but Deleuze definitely had a critical relation with Marx throughout his oeuvre. I agree 100%. Just as much as he had with Freud. Absolutely. I can't disagree here. We've talked a little bit about Deleuze's will, a little around the logic of sense. To expand, oh my God, but in the end, guys, this stuff is so complicated. You have to learn, pick this up and figure it out for yourselves, because with the logic of sense, Deleuze, yes, was very interested in expanding philosophy into Freud, because Freud, obviously, we have the unconscious, the subconsciousness, and then this is going to be of great interest to Deleuze with the virtual from Bergson, the actual. So this is obviously Deleuze in that period was very, very interested in psychology and psychoanalysis, and then that will be a part of his desire to eventually work with Pierre-Félix Guattari. And let's go back to our comment. Just as much as he had with Freud, I agree 100% there. Deleuze, Freud, Lacan. He found Deleuze was very interested in expanding philosophy into this realm of psychoanalysis and the subconscious. Which, let's say the psychoanalysis, Freud did not invent it, but that's something that in the 18th century is something new, no? And Deleuze was very, very innovative in having to incorporate psychology and psychoanalysis into philosophy. And I repeat, I'll be honest here, I've had a lot of experience in the last 10 years with psychologists, psychoanalysts, and since then I read the Anti-Oedipe, other texts, also Mieux Plateau, more from that point of view, you know. Meaning when I was younger, you know, I just thought that no, it's just pure philosophy, etc., etc. But no, in my opinion, at this phase of my life, I would tell you that it's really important to get into, you decide how much, how little, into Freud, Lacan, Jung. There's this whole curious story between Gilles Deleuze and Jung, which is very, very interesting. So, in the end, the point is, it would take hours and hours and centuries and thousands of pages, but that is a whole interesting field, and I would recommend to you that when you're reading the later works of Deleuze, especially obviously together with Guattari, to have a pretty decent, solid knowledge of Freud, Lacan, and also Carl Jung. I believe that sincerely, that also that relationship to psychology is something that tends to be overlooked, and I think it's very, very, very important and will enrich your experience or your encounters in whichever books. So by Deleuze on his own, on Deleuze and Guattari. So I would recommend that going ahead. We said just as much as he had with Freud, so that it could be said that he wanted to improve on them. Absolutely. Otherwise, what was he there for, no? Obviously, it's a very rich history on the relationship, and then clearly We know that Pierre-Félix Guattari was the heir apparent of Lacan, they argued, and obviously Pierre-Félix Guattari wanted to improve on Lacanianism, as obviously did Deleuze, of course. 100% I agree with that. I would go as far as to say that Deleuze was more an anti-capitalist than Marxist. Yeah, interesting. I was coming across this evening the brief essay on the society of control. Clearly, I mean, that's true. I would not argue with that, but I kind of at the same time ask myself, in a naive way, because I'm dumb. I know, I believe and hope our viewers are much smarter, that more an anti-capitalist than a Marxist. But given the fact that the Marx, in my opinion, is like, it's so complicated because everyone associates, Marx with communism, and we looked before at how even in France, in the intellectual community, up until the 60s, late 60s, 70s, Marx, most of his works weren't translated, so Marx was just kind of this vague kind of icon representation of Stalinism or Russian communism, which was logical because if you lived in Europe in those times, there was a real and concrete fear that the Soviet Union had captured most of Eastern Europe, and the Communist Party in Italy in the 1980s was winning every election. Operation Gladio by the part of the CIA to counterattack the growth of communism, let's say in Italy. France also had its own struggles. So in those times, there was like a concrete and obvious fear of the Soviet Union by the part of most people. I don't want to say everyone had this fear of the Soviet Union, but it was a very concrete issue that was very present, no? More an anti-capitalist than a Marxist? No, I would say that's obviously a good comment. But my question is that beyond, we're not in the 1970s in France anymore, so we have the complete works published. We know much more. We have Marx and Engels. And then I would kind of sort of say, at least for me, Marx philosophically was the first and best philosopher who understood and wrote. I'm simplifying things. I can't find the right words, but the capitalist system, and Deleuze and Guattari were always saying correctly that Marx was in awe of this system. No, obviously Karl Marx wanted to overcome it with capitalism because Karl Marx believed that even a poor worker is equally as creative as, the rich capitalist, and therefore this whole relationship to production, technology, etc., etc. But Karl Marx himself, and I would have to dig out the quotes, but I'm sure maybe Emile Plateau or Lantier-Diep, that Karl Marx was in awe of the power of capitalism. These are some of the most beautiful quotes I've ever read from Deleuze and Guattari, and it was like, Marx, this massive, incredible machine of capitalism that would break down, and then would create a limit. Obviously, the limit was to maximize its earnings, but when the law of the tendency of profit to fall kicks in, and we are living this today 100%, when it kicks in, capitalism will destroy those limits. And as I think it would be a good exercise to dig up the original quotes in text, but I'm pretty sure that according to Deleuze and Guattari, they were saying that all that is solid turns into air. No, the limits that capitalism creates for himself. Once capitalism approaches these limits as this kind of blind machine, this raging, destructive, blind machine, which only cares about, augmenting profits. Once it comes to the own limits, which it sets for itself, it will do this kind of magical operation, and all that is solid vanishes into air or dust or whatever, and then it will set up for itself a whole new series of limits. No, so it would be interesting to do something on that because I find it very powerful and beautiful the way they put that, and then that's obviously why Deleuze and Guattari will get into those three phases of history and eventually to the end of history. Way too complicated to talk about here, but the despotic machine, the capitalist machine, the tribal machine. I think I'm going from memory. I'm a lazy intellectual, and I haven't read up recently on my mille plateau, but this idea of this kind of this fact that Marx was in awe of this insane capitalist machine in which everyone is enslaved. No, the capitalist himself is a slave. It's like saying Elon Musk is a slave just as a worker in a factory. Now, obviously, we have to be rational and say that a worker in a factory who's making, my God, God knows how little, like, $1,000 per month or whatever the thing is. Elon Musk is making, $100 million per month. Okay, obviously it's different, but they're saying they're all slaves at the same time because Elon Musk cannot sleep at night because he always has to fight the law of the tendency of capital to diminish, and we've explained that here, and it's not so hard to explain. Look, my classic explanation has always been Apple computers. So Apple computers built their computers, Okay, great. Apple did their computers, and then they reached market saturation, meaning they could not augment their profits. So what did they do? They did the iPod. And then the iPod, boom, just shot them up, and they started making a lot more money. But eventually the iPod market was saturated, and cellular phones were becoming all the rage. So then I remember I watched the conference, my God, way back in, I don't remember when they did the Rocker Apple, no? That kind of stupid test with iTunes on another company's iPhone. I might still have in my closet somewhere that dumb model. And but then they went to the iPhone, and then the iPod's dead, but profits skyrocketed, and then the law, let's say the law towards saturation in the marketplace at a certain point, you just can't make all that money you did before. You need something new, shiny. You have to avoid market saturation. So then the iWatch, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's a classic example of how a company, a capitalist company, avoids the Marxist law of the tendency of saturation. Sooner or later, you can build a billion iPhones, but if all the world has the iPhones, you're going to saturate the market, and then you have to find a way to augment the profits like you did before, because before it was new, no? So either you sit there like Apple does and convince them that the iPhone 17 is going to cost, plus €200, and you're going to have to pay €1,800 because you get 2 more megapixels, and, you will have a new artificial intelligence, etc., etc. That's one way of doing it, but in the end, I don't believe that suffices. You just have to, introduce novelties and completely breaking the limits of what you had set before. So I don't know, there's too much time on this, but I repeat, Marx as an analysis of capitalism was just, he was in awe, according to Deleuze and Guattari, was just in awe of this insane machine. And like they said, and I've mentioned this before on this podcast, you can dig it up, if capitalism had found any reason to make profits on Mars, capitalism would have shot itself to Mars in the 1950s, meaning if there was money to make by going to Mars, we would have colonized like the whole fucking planet, no? The only problem is now we have Elon Musk who's saying like, okay, we need a second planet as a survival mechanism because, we're all going to destroy ourselves, etc., etc. So I can build a rocket in which we can put 8 people, and after 7 people, 8 people will go there, and then eventually after 2,000 years, they will all turn yellow because the luminosity is completely different. They will change body form. They will have huge heads and small hands because gravity is completely different. But, in 2,000 years, we will save, the human race by, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is, from a Marxist point of view, and Deleuze and Guattari directly say that if there was money to make there, no problem. We would be having a Las Vegas on the Centaurian crater. We'll be having rivers and all kinds of fun shit on Mars if there was money to be made. No, unfortunately, there's no money to be made, so the universe, our relation to the universe remains to what it is. So I'm going to take a quick pause, but I'm being kind of rude and interrupting this comment, which is very interesting. So Deleuze is more an anti-capitalist than Marxist. Yeah, complex argument, but I'm with you. When you say that he didn't bother with Marx in his books on cinema, it is not exactly true. He's correct. I was very, very superficial on the books on Deleuze's book on cinema, which I repeat, I love, and I honestly believe that those books, it's going to take decades, if not centuries, for those books to be appreciated, but those are absolutely 100% worthwhile. And yeah, I believe 100% that I would have to check that out, but we have it's not exactly true. My mistake, my bad. Since when speaking of vendors, and I love Wim Wenders, but not kind of the later works, but it's Neo-German Expressionism, and I am a total fan of kind of this nouvelle vague for German Expressionism, and I will be correctly criticized here because I'm not a film critic, but the subordination of the narrative to this kind of intense visual landscape, no? A la Fellini, in my opinion, Wim Wenders takes a lot from Federico Fellini, but don't let me diverge too much. And his film The State of Things, in the second book, The Time Image. So I think the first book is The Movement Image and The Time Image by Gilles Deleuze, and that's essentially, in his opinion, I believe, and I'm going to be really wrong, I'm going to risk this. Please write comments and criticize me. Let me check my comment section. That's going to be very related to post-World War II and how we move from, in cinema, in Gilles Deleuze's opinion, from movement subordinated to time to, no, time subordinated to movement to movement subordinate to time. I believe that is correct. So once again, just if we're just throwing out things out there that could be interesting, we have those Deleuze cinema books, which are in themselves, in my opinion, wonderful. And as our commentator is saying, that Marx is not absent from that. So that would mean, and that makes perfect sense to me, that the Marx is kind of always sort of there for Deleuze. He's not obscured. He's not. No, he's present for Deleuze. I have no problems. It makes perfect sense to me. So let's go on. The time image, he says that, to paraphrase, the capital is the final horizon of philosophy. And my first response to that is, fuck. I find that kind of frightening. The capital is the final horizon of cinematography. Now, I'm not going to respond to that because I don't believe I have the proper context, but my first impression would be that it's kind of depressing, sad, true. Deleuze had always stated towards the end of his life that literature, art, cinema was susceptible to being conquered or overcome by marketing and money in the end. And I think today in 2024 we're living that problem. Deleuze also said, I'm sure of this, that cinema cannot die, but cinema can be killed. No. However, I repeat, I do not. The capital, if it was capital is the final horizon of cinematography, I would figure it out a little bit better. The capital is the final horizon of cinematography makes me think that I'm not understanding this really well. So please correct me. I do not perfectly get that. Because also, repeat, I'm not answering to that. So, and I will look it up for the next podcast. But for example, I remember every time that I visit a Gothic cathedral, be it in France or North Italy, or I can't remember the latest one, but I remember another beautiful phrase by Gilles Deleuze saying that the predecessor of cinema was the Gothic cathedral. And then I was, whenever I hear that, I'm kind of like, oh, fuck, no, that's insane. What the hell are you saying? It's so hard to understand. But then you have to think about, his idea of nomadism, of the smooth space of the Gothic church, of the use of the flying buttress so you can go higher and higher and higher. And that all of that height was occupied by glass. And that glass is glass originally. Baked glass, but with paintings which told stories that came from the Bible, no? And then you would have to understand that Deleuze is saying here that is kind of like today we live in a digital world, so it might be hard for the new generation to get it, but in those days you would register on film and you would frame by frame by frame by frame, 24 seconds, 26, 30 would create a second. But Deleuze is kind of saying, like, look, the Gothic cathedral is the actual origin of cinema, no? That's where it comes from. And then the idea is maybe you're walking around in space in this cathedral, and it is different, but conceptually, in my opinion, not too different. If you walk around, you will be looking up, it depends on the cathedral, but this massive plate of glass, which is telling a story. It's printed glass, and then you're gonna go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and it's all illuminated in a Gothic cathedral from behind by the sun. Obviously, Deleuze is saying, look, like when you have a projection machine, essentially you're just plugging it in with a light bulb, and then you're doing more or less the same thing. Obviously, we know it's different technology, etc., etc. But no, there's so many great insights from, as always, with Gilles Deleuze in his book on cinema, that I could lose time here telling you another one, which is another one that blew my mind, but I don't want to waste too much time here because I've only talked about this and I need to get back to our conclusions on Marxism. But the capital is the final horizon, of cinematography. We will look into that. A take that even today best describes the state of cinematography. In my opinion today, the state of cinematography is complete, total trash, saturated by embarrassing forms of marketing, but sequels and just like horrific. But however, for example, I repeat, today is the 1st of September, unfortunately, 2024. Tomorrow I'm going to go to the cinema and watch a new Italian film called La Chimera, which we'll see what happens, but my point is, and there's another beautiful quote by Deleuze, but I don't remember where he says, like, in these kind of times, it's kind of like when people go to the mountains and then they build small fires, so obviously the state of cinema today is catastrophic, but we have to believe and hope and be optimistic. There are very talented filmmakers that are kind of hidden up in the mountains, and they light fires by night, so they can be small, independent, they have no funding, but we have to believe that this medium, this art will continue and survive, let's say, this kind of point of capitalism, this phase of capitalism which we're in right now, which is different from other phases. Today things are changing big time, and then we're kind of in this post-globalist world for the moment, tripolar, and then things are changing everywhere. So if I were to be optimist, I would say that there are so many opportunities for cinema like never before. But the problem is the subsumption of creativity by marketing, by money or capital. So I repeat, I apologize to our commenter if I've interpreted this incorrectly, but believe me, I did take the time to discuss it with all of our viewers without your permission. I apologize, but I honestly don't see anything negative about that. We can talk about things and openly, and everyone should be able to make their own decisions and see the stuff. So the last line here is in his book on Foucault, and that's another good point. I may or may have, probably would have not gotten to that on this brief what do you call it, on this brief on this brief detour, sorry, that's the right word, detour on this podcast. I may or may not have got to Foucault. I didn't, because for me personally, Deleuze's book on Foucault and Deleuze's relationship to Foucault, to Michel Foucault, my apologies, is very, very complicated. And that's a book which I picked up and put back down like hundreds of times because I find that book so difficult to follow. And here a commentator says, in his book on Foucault, he mentions Marxism 6 times. He checked it, very rigorous, but I believe that. If he did it more, it would not have surprised me. But the most important is his mention of the need for finding new tools for fighting capitalism in his postscript, which is his true legacy or kind of testament. So once again, sorry guys, I'm drinking water so I don't sound like a dead mule most of the podcast. But the most important is his mention of the need, this is Gilles Deleuze, for finding new tools for fighting capitalism, absolutely, in his postscript, which I presume, I repeat, I'm not too familiar with that book. I've had it, I've tried to read it, and I've kind of always abandoned it. For me, it's just kind of like my fault. I always found that book like, oh my God, so difficult. Then you also have that kind of sad story between the falling out of the relationship with Foucault and Deleuze, etc. But that's something you have to. I have to pick it up. I have to read it. There's no excuses here. No, I have to man up and do it. So, but the most important is his mention of the need for finding new tools for fighting capitalism in his postscript. So I assume what we're saying here is that beyond the book itself, which, like all other works from Gilles Deleuze, you absolutely have to read, we are saying here that check the postscript to his book, which our commentator is saying is his true legacy or kind of testament, and we will do that, and I'm showing this to you so you may do so as well. And yeah, what can I say? I agree with more of this. Let's hope I don't accidentally shut down OBS like I usually do. No, they're all very, very good, solid, valid. No, what am I doing? I'm doing something stupid. I'm going to shut down OBS. They're all good, solid comments, and I would invite any of our followers to look in on that. Send your own comments if you have anything to say. Don't hesitate to do that. I was trying to find my favorite live comment screen where nobody never answers, but it's just kind of fun to send things out into absolute nothingness. I think the first time I used Twitter was on a Mac laptop with 9.1, where Twitter, you just had this little stupid window and you could write 26 words, no? But I think that was even before the internet interface came out, no? So a little bit later, after Twitter, you could go on to the interface and see what you wrote and if anyone replied. But for me, the real beauty was, you were just, in the beginning, you just had this little small window on your OS 9.1. And you would just write a maximum of 26 characters, and the beauty of that was that you were sending it into the abyss. No, you had no likes, retweets, follows. You're just shooting shit into nothing. And sometimes psychologically, it's actually quite fun to just I don't know, to do like messages in bottles and throw it into the sea, and nothing's gonna happen, but. Personally, I find a kind of beauty in this kind of will to the abyss, and then just yelling out into nothingness, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do is spend a ton of time here. I know it is late. I'm going to take a 3-minute pause because my telephone is sending me a lot of messages. None of them are going to be positive, and we're going to take a quick jump back into our original text by Garo, Isabelle Garo, and Sauvagnargues, and just kind of try and close up on what we said so far. And I repeat, I'd like to be quicker on this, but at the same time, each question in this interview, which is between the interviewer and Isabelle and Anna, you can't really understand anything unless you dedicate a little bit of time, because there's more. Further we go along, the more complicated things become. Sorry, drink some water here, and let me look at how much we have. Maybe I'll skip some stuff, because I think for those of you who have watched recently, I think we made our point pretty well. But if we push through a little bit further, like for example, and I repeat, the idea here is to give you information which may or may not be useful. You may know everything. Maybe it will be something new. I think we also talked about Deleuze and Althusser. Althusser, a huge, one of the most important strict Marxist in France, but also an anti-Hegelian Marxist. And then here you could kind of get into this whole other interesting world. Slavoj Žižek comes to mind first. Regarding Deleuze, relationship to Hegel, also Marx, we all know, was quite fond of the fact that he believed in his thought he had reversed Hegelianism, and therefore, as strange as it seems, like what we saw before, that Deleuze is very attracted to Althusser, because Althusser contested the Hegelian dialectic, and we all should know that Deleuze is very, very anti-Hegelian, no? So therefore, that's kind of an alliance. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, no? And therefore, Deleuze had a certain relationship with Althusser, as we looked at yesterday, according to Isabelle Garo and Sauvagnargues, that it was Althusser who made much more use of Deleuze than the contrary. Deleuze may have been a little bit, naive, because his interest in Althusser was the fact that he was an anti-Hegelian Marxist. So once again, also to answer the person that sent the comments, and so there's another relationship here between Deleuze and Marx. So obviously, Deleuze and Marx is not something that you can hide in a closet, swipe under the rug. No, the relationship is there, and Deleuze was very interested in Althusser. My point, what I'm saying, right or wrong, and you guys decide, do not believe me. Look at me. Do you want to believe someone that looks like me? You'd be crazy. But what I'm saying is that Deleuze's relationship, his interest in Althusser was the fact that he was a Marxist, however, contested Hegelianism, contested Hegel, and therefore fully approved of a Marx who was anti-Hegelian, and therefore, like I said before, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and it shouldn't be a big surprise that Deleuze was interested in that, and that does, however, demonstrate that Deleuze was absolutely interested in Karl Marx. I cannot tell you otherwise. I would be absolutely, like, I don't know the truth, but I'd be lying if I tried to deny that. So the relationship between Deleuze and Marx is absolutely there. And what I'm going to do right now is, at this late hour, I'm not going to shut this down because I'm not even sure if I can get it back and working, provided that it is even working. I'm going to take a 2-minute break because I have a lot of messages on my cell phone, which I do not want to read, but out of pure masochism, I'm going to do that, and I'll be back in 2 minutes, and we're going to keep blazing on into the night and see how far we can go in the essay which we've looked at and in the last few days. That is Isabelle Garo and Sauvagnargues on Deleuze and Guattari and their relationships as individuals and as one author together on Karl Marx. So let me flip my camera. I'll be back 2 minutes. Promise. Yo. Oh my God. Pain. Who the fuck is right? No, that's that one. You don't go. Oh my god. Nice. Track me. Hello. No. The camera. Track me. Well, zoom out further. Doesn't listen to me anymore. Let's try. No, obviously that's closer. What in God's name? Further. Further. Can you do it? No. Okay. You obviously are in control of things here and not I. And let's get quickly back into substance. So I have to find a quick way to get my pages on here. My God. What in God's name? Okay. Do we even have pages open? We do. Input text to them. Why are we sharing that? This is really bizarre. Huh? We're sharing my OBS window for sharing. That seems to be quite tautological. Let's try an application. Text the menu agent. No. Maybe because it's not open. I still have to get used to Mac. My God. Let's shut it down. Capture window. Not happy. Capture the screen. No, that's silly. Oh my God. Capture application. What do we have? No, I saw it. Pages. Got it. There we go. Oh my God. We are freaking awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next question in this interview. And translate from French to English, which should be a lot easier for all of us. And this is the next question from the author of the interview. And this is going to be a curveball from him to Isabelle Garo. And I'm going to copy and paste this. Anyway, guys, trust me, I won't go on for too long, because otherwise I know you're going to go crazy. And if we have to pick it up tomorrow, we have to pick it up tomorrow, huh? That's c'est la vie. So hopefully we see this. This is crazy. Totally weird. Do we see this? Yes. Isabelle Garo, in your Althusser, Foucault, Deleuze, and Marx, you analyze the paradoxical convergence of Deleuze and Althusser that Anne Sauvagnargues mentioned a few moments ago. Both endeavor to criticize the Hegelian dialectic in its internal ideology. So both Deleuze and Anne Sauvagnargues are criticizing the Hegelian dialectic in the internal teleology. Teleology is obviously the progress, let's say, of mankind, technological man, technology, etc. Both begin by opposing to dialectical idealism a conception of structures highlighting their conditions of irreducible internal multiplicity and inequality. Both resort to Spinoza to redefine a materialist singularity of the Marxist dialectic. So, this is curious to me. I just want to check one thing before saying something really stupid here. Okay, so I'm looking at a book right now, as I believed, called Althusser Lecture de Spinoza. Althusser, a reader of Spinoza, YouTube Spinoza et Althusser, Marx, Spinoza, Althusser, Spinoza à Paris, Althusser et Spinoza. Therefore, Althusser, this was admitted before by my ignorance, was also a critic of the role of the Hegelian dialectic in teleology, and therefore I think we've seen before Toni Negri, Spinoza, we have Althusser, Spinoza, Gilles Deleuze from, I believe, a more rigorous philosophical point of view, Spinoza. So once again, the only thing I would highlight here is by the part of Deleuze his interest in Althusser, because not only did he contest things get complicated here, the ideal conceptualization of the Hegelian dialectic in the teleology of Karl Marx. So that sounds complicated. Can we explain that in a more simple way? We'd have to get into the Hegelian dialectic, which is ideal, but as always, we could spend hours and hours and hours of talking about this, but what we're saying here, Isabelle obviously knows infinitely more than I, and she's going to explain it. They resort, Althusser, and she's saying, I believe, Spinoza, they both resort, Deleuze, Althusser, to Spinoza to redefine a materialist singularity of the Marxist dialectic. So, the whole relationship between Deleuze and Hegel is very, very complicated. We know that Deleuze hated Hegel. He was his enemy, and we could dedicate easily so much time to that. But just to extract the very simple things, just think about the Hegelian dialectic, its internal ideology, internal keyword, opposing to dialectical idealism. So keep in mind, Hegel, internal dialectical idealism or idealism, and the problem of the materialist singularity of the Marxist dialectic. So obviously we would have to get into this, but just think for now, explaining this line by line is very, very complicated, but think about the ideal. At the same time, think about Deleuze and all of his philosophical efforts to redefine the ideal as the virtual. The transcendent and the transcendental, which we've looked at in this podcast. So let's just say for the moment, what is my camera doing? You always simplify things, always break it out and simplify things. No, in the end, if some sophisticated guy comes up to you and says you're a moron, it doesn't matter. I mean, you have to understand, like, in the most simple way, what these issues are about. So I'm just saying right now, think about the dialectic, which we should know about. What time is it? Oh my God, oh my goodness, hang on. I apologize. I will shut down real quick. It's just that I do not want to leave things too open. So I'm reading to you now the dialectic, which is known as the dialectical method, begins in Greece. And originally referred to a dialogue between people holding different points of view about a subject, but wishing to arrive at truth through reasoned argumentation. So, I'm just going to throw out some stuff there because this issue is very complicated, but like everything else, if you simplify and go back to the base of things, it really isn't so difficult. So what did I just say? In ancient Greece, people disputed the truth of things, no? For example, I believe my goat is divine. And then another person comes along and says, no, your goat is not divine. It's just an ordinary goat. I'm going to hack it up to pieces and make a really good stew out of your goat. So you have different points of view. My goat is divine, not divine. But you have to arrive to the truth. So the truth is what? Is the goat divine or not divine? So you have to do a reasoned argumentation, and that resembles debate. But the concept excludes subjective elements such as emotional appeal. So I raised my goat since it was 3 months old. I love my goat, and I went to the oracle. The oracle, told me that my goat is divine. That's subjective, no? What the fuck? I mean, that's just what you believe. It's not something objective. So it excludes subjective elements such as emotional appeal and rhetoric. So I think rhetoric is the original Greek philosophers, starting from Aristotle, more or less, when you created philosophical ideas or concepts or whatever, you had to go into the forum and sit there in front of all of the local people and philosophers, and you had to debate and prove to them why what you are saying is true. So that's a simple way of talking about rhetoric. It has its origins in ancient philosophy. And let's see if these guys can say anything simple about Hegel. Hegelianism refigured dialectic, so Hegel recreated the original Greek concept of the dialectic to no longer refer to literal dialogue. Instead, the term takes on the specialized meaning of development by way of overcoming internal contradictions. Dialectical materialism, a theory advanced by Karl Marx. So right here, very, very important. We are talking about here we go. Hegel, internal contradictions. Karl Marx, external contradictions. This is a theory advanced by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, adapted the Hegelian dialectic into a materialist theory of history. The legacy of Hegelian and Marxian dialectics has been criticized by philosophers such as, I'm not going to even name the names because it's embarrassing, who consider it unscientific. So, obviously, the only point I want to make here to understand that a little better, I repeat, you guys probably understand this much better than I because it's been a while that I've been dealing with Hegel. Internal dialectic. Dialectic is two opposing points of view which must be subsumed together in order to become true, no? Therefore objective, therefore beyond opinion. Like I said, my goat is divine, your goat is not divine. It is beyond rhetoric, so I can't take my goat to Aristotle, and I cannot go in front of 100 people and explain to them why my goat is divine. No, it has to be an operation of pure internal logic, no? And that is idealism, transcendent. It's an interior philosophical question, internal, no? Is my goat divine or not divine? I love my goat. It doesn't matter if you love your goat. It has to be decided by a question of its essence, by its existence. And therefore you can go and argue with the whole world and try and create a dialectic, and maybe you meet 100 people who say, yes, your goat is divine. You meet 50 people that say, no, your goat sucks. We want to eat your goat. But in the end, Hegel says it's all bullshit, no? That's all subjective. It's emotions. Therefore, it has to be decided on an internal level, which means an ideal level, which means transcendental, etc., etc. But we can go much, much further into this, but it's already late, and I haven't even got halfway through the first paragraph, and I'm tucking my brains out a bunch of stuff that it was never planned for anyway. But it's all interesting, so I'm all in. And but Marx has this materialistic issue. Where Marx is essentially saying, no, these aren't history. Teleology is not ideal, it works at the materialist level. So maybe, I'm not sure, it's much more complicated. Maybe Karl Marx would have saved my goat and thrown him into some slaughtering machine for goats, and he would have ended up in the new McDonald's goat sandwich, whatever. But I can't ask too much from Karl. Hello, monitor disappeared. We're back, so let's keep going on. Both begin by opposing dialectical. So all this stupid shit that I just spent 10 minutes telling you, and I'm sure you've got a headache, yeah? The whole point is to try and explain in my own limited means that Deleuze and Althusser are more on the Marxist side of material dialectics. So you still have the issue of dialectics, meaning two opposing things, which must be subsumed. That's a bad word. They must combine in two opposing forces, This will be Hegel's idea of history, but it's ideal, Zizek is always talking about this kind of crap. Hegel, the French Revolution, Hegel said you always need two times. So the first cycle will be Ré Louis XIV, the king, Louis XIV, with Marie Antoinette telling the people who cannot eat, go buy cakes, you fucking poor losers. and then you have a revolution, and then next cycle you have Napoleon, and then there will be this massive reaction, and after I'm making historical mistakes, sorry. After the people just go up and fuck up Louis XIV, they hang him, Marie Antoinette, then you have the Jacobins that come in, and they have to restore order because, fine, go kill your king, but in the end, society still needs to have some kind of fond, some kind of basis to go on. You're sitting there like shit. We just destroyed 2,000 years French hierarchy of the kings who are, nominated, who have the blood of God in them, and then we've killed them all, and now it's just chaos. No. So the Jacobins come in and say you can't have chaos. Come on, but the Jacobins cannot do it without, arresting, tens of thousands of people and installing a regime of violence, and then classic Hegelian stuff, and Slavoj Žižek is a big proponent of that. However, Marx is things work different with Karl Marx, but I repeat, these are very, very complicated examples for highly trained and talented Marxists, which I'm not. I have very proud to have Diego Maradona as Che Guevara, etc., and this is all kind of interesting stuff you can look into. So my only point here is I keep repeating, everyone is sitting there. There's so much space, there's so much stuff to pick up, so much work to do. There's the reinvention of the whole left wing to be done. I mean, there's a completely rich terrain of stuff which you can. I said that last night with Guattari. There's so much to be done. So we should not sit here and we should take, if I can say anything useful, they're just small tools. Dig here, dig there. I promise you, you will find like an incredibly rich terrain, and you have so much to think about. And if you're a writer, to write about. If you're a philosopher, I mean, there's just so much stuff here. None of this is closed. The whole point of this, even if you just read this, you understand that this is. It's all stuff that can be challenged and developed and renewed, respected, obviously, but there's just so much space here. So, so we know Althusser, Gilles Deleuze, very attached to Spinoza, and they needed Spinoza to redefine the Marxist dialectic. A whole other interesting issue, meaning why was Karl Marx's reversal of the Hegelian dialectic not sufficient, according to Deleuze and Althusser, and why did they need Spinoza? Why did Tony Negri need Spinoza when he was in prison, Why did they need attributes and modes? Why did Gilles Deleuze always insist that the only problem was Spinoza? And the last final thing that had to be done was to push substance around the nodes, and then essentially very, very complicated stuff, but I'll go out on a limb here and say that's going to be the virtual and actual of Deleuze, where he's going to be subtracting the transcendental and reducing, let's say, the three planes of Spinoza, which is substance, divinity, the divine, to the attributes is the means of expression of the divine, to the modes, which means the actual living beings. Deleuze will compress that by his will to, like as he said, to turn substance around the modes. So, and this stuff does involve Marx. Once again, we're not sitting here trying to say that Deleuze had no, Marx, he didn't care about. Obviously, if he was dealing with Althusser, that means that Marx was someone significant. But on another line, you suggest resonances with the late Althusser and the extrapolations of random materialism from the problems of contingency and conjuncture that preoccupied Althusser from the beginning. You also mention in passing the appropriation of the work of the Althusserians into anti-Oedipus. Very complicated, very difficult, and guys, I know this has been an unusually long podcast. Let me look quickly at the length of her answer, because I really know it's Saturday and you have better things to do. Oh, where's that? Google Chrome. How long is this answer? I don't want to spend... Oh, no, her answers... We're going to take a 1-minute break, I promise. This will be the answer to that question by Isabelle Garo, which is only a few phrases. And then we'll shut this whole thing down and we'll pick it up at a later date because, I repeat again, the question is complicated as it was. All boiled down to how do you understand the dialogue souterrain, that means underground. How do you, this is regarding l'Anti-Oedipe, which, as we've seen in the last few days, this is Deleuze and Guattari's first major work together. Not the first work, the first major work together, but they are asking Isabelle, how do you understand the underground relation, if there is one, between the tactical opportunism in service of the heresy, the Deleuzian heresy, in... What the fuck am I reading? Yeah, it's true. Heresy, the Deleuzian heresy in the academic field. Operation théorique, is it a theoretical operation? Et idéologique and ideological, déterminable, able to be determined par ses enjeux ou ses effets. So the question, and we're going to look at it in 1 minute after my quick break, is essentially, Isabelle Garo, how do you understand this underground dialogue, if it even exists, in the Anti-Oedipus? Is it a tactical opportunism which is a part of the Deleuzian heresy in the academic field? So we're saying here, I'm sorry, but translation, I repeat, I don't want to critique translators, but you have to pass over it a couple of times. Otherwise, you cannot translate something correctly. My apologies if I take time, but you have to remix things. Otherwise, nothing makes any sense, and there'll be all kinds of mistakes. So once again, how do you understand the underground dialogue, if one even exists, in the Anti-Oedipus? Is it a tactical opportunism in the service of the heresy, the Deleuzian heresy in the academic field? So the question is, do you think that, what's your opinion on this underground Marxism by the part of Gilles Deleuze? Is that just a kind of heretical terrorism Deleuze was trying to do to the academic field, a provocation? Or is it a true theoric and ideological theory which will play out its effects? So where do I have this freaking thing here? No, I want to write this question because, guys, I know, can I even scroll here anymore? I know I look stupid, but I'm not worried about looking stupid. Trust me, this stuff, French is a tough language. I mean, you have to go over this. I'm going to try and write a really simple question because that's the real test if you understand something. So what am I going to write here? Watch this. I'm going to say this is a question to Isabelle Garo. And the author is saying, do you guys see this? Probably not. OBS, did I shut it down? No. Isabelle Garo, the question. The question is, okay, this is interesting, huh? Isabelle Garo, if I could only have pages, my God, computers in the last 40 years have absolutely, the desktop has not evolved. It's a horror story. I cannot believe this shit. Anyway, you have stated that the l'antideep, I'm just going to put the Oedipus. No, nice. I'm not going to write it correctly. No, Jesus Christ. Sorry, Jesus Christ. I can't say that. Anti-Oedipus. No, anti-Oedipus. I'm just going to write it like that. Just be patient with me. Go back to the question. Appropriated the work of, this is a really strange but interesting question, the work of many Althusserian authors. Kind of a weird question, but that theoretically I can defend myself on that one. And once again, as we stated before, important to understand here, Althusser, like we talked about before, chooses Spinoza as a means of resolving the conflict between Hegelian idealist dialectics and Marxian materialism. So once again, materialism, the question here is dialectics, materia, idea, or material, question mark. And that is Hegel, Marx. Evidently, the argument between Hegel and Deleuze on his own was not sufficiently conclusive for an Althusser or a Gilles Deleuze. Hence, the relationship between Gilles Deleuze and Althusser, and by implication the Althusserians. So we're going to take a 1 minute break, translate Isabelle's answer, and then we're going to shut down, and we will pick up in the upcoming days on this issue. I repeat, we've gone on way too far, but at the same time, it's kind of a shame to just leave this thing completely in open air. So I will be back, believe you me, maximum 90 seconds. Be right back. Okay, crack me, s'il vous plaît. Merci. So let's end this thing and get right back to response, which I repeat should be very quick. This is the answer by Isabelle Garo. We'll translate this up. And once again, this may not give everyone, the answer we're all dreaming about or hoping about, etc., but I have complete faith in Isabelle Garo. So let's see. Her answer to that question is the rapprochement. Didn't want to translate, but the getting close together between Deleuze and Althusser is above all the work of the later Althusser himself, even if Deleuze is the first to mobilize the reference to Althusser because of his anti-Hegelianism. But this reference is integrated, literally digested by Deleuze within a work fundamentally very far from that of Subsequently, and much later, it is Louis Althusser who acclaimed Deleuzian themes, sometimes, but not always, mentioning the work of Gilles Deleuze. Important, sometimes, but not always, no? So we always have to understand the character of people, no? And that should help us a little bit to understand this Althusser. Mentioning the work of Gilles Deleuze in final texts, which cannot be read without caution. Thank you very much. What I said before. Like I said, in life, some people, very few people, are reliable, and other people you can really trust on. I believe Gilles Deleuze understood this more than many other people. So read the last works of Althusser regarding Deleuze with caution. The valorization, and then think also of the intellectual honesty of Garo here. Marx is always, one of my problems with this whole grandeur of Marx is that you're just pushing this thing, even irrationally. But no, she says it outright. She says, don't trust, the later things that Althusser appropriated, often without giving Deleuze credit, and be very careful when you read those texts. And that's what I'm always saying here. When you're reading texts or papers be very, very, very careful about in the end, you have to make a decision, but be critical. Don't just believe it because whatever. But the valorization of the encounter, of the contingent, the always radicalized affirmation of the crisis of Marxism places him after the fact in the late lineage of those who were his juniors. But it is then the end of a theoretical trajectory which realigns itself with the currents that have become relatively dominant, at least in the face of defeated Marxism, and not the relaunch of new hypotheses. This is why there is no opportunistic tactic here, but rather a recognition, a tribute perhaps, at the same time as an admission of failure. So, essentially, given the question, and let me repeat the original question, because even for me it's hard to lose our train of thought here, was what was the role of Althusser and his followers, the authors that followed blindly Althusser? And Isabelle shuts it down. She says, look, Althusser at that point, late Althusser was not the same person as the original Althusser, which is absolutely normal and understandable. But she's saying, literally, I'll read again, it's the end of his theoretical trajectory. Therefore, at that point, Althusserian Marxism was defeated, and I repeat, we always need context, etc., not so easy, but Althusserian Marxism was defeated at that point. It chose not to renew itself and create new lines of flight, new paths for Marxism. It just chose to, go out on its own glorious deathbed. And she says, therefore, I believe that in the Anti-Oedipe, I think this is 1972 published, at the best, Deleuze, or Deleuze and Guattari, it's too obscure to understand which one. Maybe they gave him a kind of tribute for the important work that surely he had done, but at the same time, there was kind of an admission of failure. So the important point here is that, and we're going to shut down right now. Let me see if I can close down this window, is that we have stated and still maintain that the most of the Marxism in Anti-Oedipe and Plateau come from Pierre Félix Guattari. However, Deleuze, as mentioned, I think in the comments we saw in the beginning, is peripherally always interested in this fact, but from a more philosophical point of view. And so much revolves around, obviously, Deleuze's relation to Hegel, and the fact that in the 1960s in intellectual circles in France, Spinoza began to be kind of picked up by not everyone, but a lot of people, especially Marxists, as a kind of way to resolve this difficulty from the path towards Hegel to Marx. So tonight, I looked at that in a super superficial way, because that would be a whole other issue. In the comment section, let me know if you want me to get into that. Next time I can do it, no problems whatsoever. It will certainly be interesting, but sticking to our main point here, it's that still Deleuze, his relationship with Althusser demonstrates that he's interested in Marxism, but I still don't believe that the main our main point on this detour, that being that for us, the Grandeur of Marx could not have possibly been the last book of Deleuze. Is that definitely he's absolutely interested in that, but so far, through everything we've seen so far, that relationship is very strictly tied to Hegel, and probably we talked about it last time. Deleuze's works with Guattari, I imagine he had no kind of problem with the militantism and Marxism of Pierre Félix Guattari. He was probably very fascinated by it, and as he has stated, he said, Felix was the diamond miner, my job was to refine the diamonds. And what does that mean essentially? That means essentially that what Deleuze would one amongst many other things he had to do was make sure that a lot of the things that Guattari was saying had to be refined, meaning they had to be philosophically consistent. So the whole issue of machines, the cuts of flows, one of Deleuze's prime concerns, in my opinion, was that all had to be made philosophically consistent. That means aligned with Spinoza, for example, aligned with his whole philosophical work. So when you sit there in Anti-Oedipus, which in the beginning it's a nightmare to understand things and it's crazy, at the same time, I think it's worthy of trying to look at it this way. Not everything, but a lot of the parts, especially the whole parts about machines, are coming from Guattari, but Deleuze is refining them and making them philosophically airtight. That's a terrible word, but Deleuze is, and I'm not saying it's this way, I'm just giving an example. Don't kill me. The flows maybe could be attributes, and the materialist dialectic could be reinterpreted as the modes as determined by the virtual, which is essentially Deleuze's original concept of his only criticism of Spinoza, as far as I know, meaning you have to turn substance around the nodes, etc., etc. So once again, the further we go into this, the more interesting it gets. There's a whole bunch of new points and directions, lines of flight everywhere. But I still don't think, for me, the major thesis changes. The relationship between Deleuze and Marx is extremely different from the relationship between Deleuze and Guattari and Marx. And when Deleuze and Guattari write together as D&G, Deleuze and Guattari, obviously, Marx will take on a more important role, and then you get into all kinds of complicated issues, which are for historians of philosophy, essentially, if they exist anymore. I'm just kind of figuring out, but even intuiting, who is giving more over here, who's doing more over here. And I'm maintaining that Deleuze's principal role was to refine a lot of stuff which Guattari would come up with and make it philosophically stable and consistent, and therefore resistant to attack in the history of philosophy, basically making it really philosophically concrete and not being open to attack by critics of Nietzsche or Spinoza. I mean, to make the whole thing consistent. And I'm going to close here, just another 30 seconds. I mean, if you look after the Anti-Oedipe, for example, Guattari has said that after the publishing, Deleuze realized he made a mistake, and he was working for years on nomadology. So my point in explaining this is just to show that they're both absolutely adding components here and there, but in the end, as a philosophical work, it was up to Deleuze to make that stuff consistent. So I'm sure of this quote. After the publishing of L'Anti-Oedipe, Guattari said, it's been 3 years that Gilles has been working on the concept of the nomad, because that was what was missing from the Anti-Oedipe, and I believe Émile Plateau. This whole concept of nomad and nomadology will kind of take a very, very, very important role. And at the meantime, just to show how things worked, like I'm working now on the texts of Elias Sambar in Palestine, and originally in the late 70s it was Félix Guattari, and we've talked about this before. We've done a podcast on Sambar that would go out every night and watch these seminars which Sambar and other Palestinian authors were doing, and Gilles Deleuze was at home because he was different. He had a wife. He wanted to come back in silence and work on his stuff. Guattari was completely a different personality. Guattari was out there watching these seminars and was fascinated by them, and then at the end he introduced himself to Elias Sambar and said, "Hi, I'm Félix Guattari," and then they talked, and then Guattari said, I want to introduce you to my friend one day. His name is Gilles Deleuze, and somebody said, okay, great. So eventually it was Guattari that went to Gilles Deleuze and said, look, I've been watching these seminars while you've been staying at home, all night working, reading your books, and then I want you to meet these people that I met. And Deleuze kind of reluctantly, I imagine, I don't know if he was reluctant, but he said, okay, Felix, okay, I'll go. And then Deleuze eventually met Elias Sambar and was very fascinated by him, and was fascinated how it tied to his work he was doing on nomads. So Deleuze identified very strongly the Palestinian people as a population in becoming, and therefore something completely consistent with the things he was working on. So he interviewed Sambar a few times. It ended up in 1, 2, or 3, I don't remember how many interviews, which were published in the newspapers, and then it ended up in a book for sure, La Grandeur de Yasser Arafat, but also The Indians of Palestine, where Deleuze goes and talks about the historical relationship between the Palestinian population and the Native American population in the 1800s. In that book, capitalism plays a big role in what Deleuze was saying, but not only, and once again, if you have any time, you look on our podcast, and we have a very good explanation of this. So once again, I'm just saying, different people, different roles. Nothing, in my opinion, changes. A very strong relation between Guattari and Marx. Deleuze, yes, certainly in a different way. In my opinion, not so central. I may be wrong. But at the same time, my point is always just, if I can convey anything to you, is that as lame and as stupid as our times might seem in terms of culture and literature, philosophy, cinema, music, believe me, there's just so much to be explored, no? You just have the balls, the courage to find a way to do it, and there's so much to be young. Deleuze, talking about Spinoza, would mention, I would have to find the interview that, we are still so young, no? People tell you, well, the human population has been here since the Egyptians, and therefore, 5,000 BC, 2,000, we're 8,000 years ago. And Spinoza is compared to infinity, 8,000 years is what? It's nothing. It's an instant, no? So, everything here, in my opinion, we're still very young, and then there's all kinds of stuff we can do. So I repeat, do not get discouraged, because there's just so much out there. Like when Spinoza, and Deleuze calls it the war cry of Spinoza. What is the war cry of Baruch de Spinoza? We don't even know what a body can do. That's the seventh kind of. We have no clue even what a body can do, no? And you can dig up the lectures at Vincent in the internet on that. But Spinoza is just kind of saying we're like babies, really, no? We have no idea what we can do, what we're possible of doing. And we all know that for Spinoza, body is not our individual body. A body is a relation. Therefore, when you go swimming, you're making a body with the ocean. When you're protesting in the plaza against the government, us 2,000 people, we form one body. So, we don't even know what we can do or what we're capable of. So we don't have to wait for any kind of famous technological singularity. Before that, we have no clue. And I think that's Nietzschean also, but I don't want to get into trouble. So anyway, I'm talking too much. I'm shutting down. Have a lovely Sunday. And as always, we appreciate each and one of you, and hope to see you next time, and hope you picked up something interesting this evening. Take care.